In this video, I'm going to talk about Principle 5, applying rhetorical patterns. And we're going to start right off the top by saying that structure is key. It's key. It's key. It's going to help your reader see the information almost before it gets to them. That you're setting up a pattern of presentation that is so familiar to them that their brain is more ready. And I'm not being all new agey. It really is key, is thinking about how you want the flow of your argument to lead your reader along. And in earlier videos, I talked about the mode of inquiry. That point in your research where you are acquiring material. You're acquiring knowledge, evidence, you're looking at how other people have thought about the issue, and then we move to mode of presentation. And this is an important distinction, because when you're in mode of inquiry, things are chaotic, and that's okay. In fact, it's good, and you're scrawling notes here and there. Mode of presentation, when you shift into that gear, that's when we start thinking about structure. So off the top, rhetoric, right? All it is, rhetoric's a fancy word for language used to achieve an effect. And you've got all sorts of patterns that you can create as you develop a document. Right, I put in that it's sort of rhetorical patterns are a grown-up version of the knock-knock joke. Anybody who's grown up in a Western culture, and many not in Western culture, know about the knock-knock joke. So he says, knock, knock. You say, who's there? Right? My daughter came home from school. She was so proud. She said, knock, knock. I said, who's there? She said, orange. I said, orange who? She laughed. She said, orange, you glad to see me? It was cute. I laughed, right? Of course, as a dad, I laugh really hard because she make her feel good. But really, it was such a moment where she didn't have to prompt me. She has to prompt her little brothers, but she didn't have to prompt me. We had a communicational event that was just, it was very fluid, right? Here I am deconstructing humor, right? Deconstructing humor is like dissecting a frog. The frog dies and nobody enjoys it. Right? I will not dissect any more forms of humor tonight. I promise. Two, what we'll call metastructures, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. Many of you are in the sciences. Almost all of you are in the sciences. You've got inductive logic. You've got deductive logic. And inductive logic starts with evidence and then builds towards a claim. So it starts with very specific material and draws out broad theories, laws. So moving from data towards theory, other people describe it as the bottom-up approach. So here's an example. Many students game during lecture. Very specific claim. Test scores have declined since laptops entered the lecture hall. Laptops should not be allowed in lecture halls. So they've moved, right? This person's moved from a very specific observation to a more general observation, two pieces of evidence, translated those two pieces of evidence into a general claim. And deductive logic, right, it's just the opposite. So you start with a broad claim, and then you introduce or you find the evidence that supports that claim. And so you're moving from theory to research, from broad to specific. And so here's a counter, an example, but a counter argument. The success of technology in the classroom depends on innovative learner-centered teaching techniques. Right? There's your broad claim. What's your evidence? Students in courses where instructors integrated laptops via classroom-based research scored much higher on their exams. oh, interesting, right? From a content-wise, many of you have laptops. Many of you are in lecture halls with laptops. And I think they're discontinuing the laptop program, right? I'm a little bit disconnected from the school, but that's what I hear. So, but nevertheless, right? You've got laptops, and different instructors will use them differently. And so, is it the technology or is it the instructional material? So, both. I don't mean to pick on inductive logic here. Both have risks of abuse, and both have their place and their strength. They're just different approaches. So when you turn this inductive versus deductive logic into an actual style of arrangement, a meta pattern, it actually mirrors that mode of inquiry versus mode of presentation. Induction is a little bit like the mode of inquiry. You start with facts and you're trying to put them together, and you're looking for a theory, you're looking for a position, you're looking for a claim. Mode of presentation, you start with a claim and then you present the evidence to support that claim. And the authors make the course text make the point that deductive arrangements are faster to read and are better remembered. We can get into all sorts of psychology about it, but basically the person gets the core message from your document or your presentation. They get it right away, and it orients everything that they hear after. So you've given them a high level claim, a paradigm in which to make sense of all the evidence that gets presented after. An inductive arrangement as a communicational strategy can sometimes leave your readers wondering, where are we going? What's happening? And that's that. When I talk about no mystery in your proposals and your reports, no mystery, inductive arrangements have the risk of becoming a little bit like a mystery novel. You're reading, you're drawing people along, hoping they'll stick with you until you get to your core claim. No mystery, right? No mystery. And so when you have a document, right, so inductive versus deductive, we can talk about that as sort of the meta structure. The actual pattern of how you present information. Your document will usually use one major rhetorical pattern, but within those major ones, smaller ones, you might include you might be doing a classification using a rhetorical pattern of classification, and you might have definitions and process explanations in there, but you'll have a dominant one and then supporting ones. And the text does a pretty good job of distinguishing between simple and more complex rhetorical patterns. The more simple ones include mechanism description, process description, classification, division. All of these they lend themselves to more narrow purposes, and they're very useful, but they're not maybe appropriate for that interpretive work, those interpretive claims. And most of you will move to more complex rhetorical patterns naturally, right? It's what we do when we look at cause and effect, comparison and contrast, and in the matter of this course, you've got situation, problem, solution, evaluation. It sort of lines up with an option paper, right? It's also a comparison and contrast, but you are looking for solutions. How do you implement these rhetorical patterns? The best way, the best thing you can do, and I know many people resist, and many people who've been writing for a long time resist this, is outline. right? Don't worry about the introduction, the finer points of it. As long as you've got your purpose there and you've got a sense of where you're going and the type of document you're producing, then try to just begin to map out the flow of your argument. And you can do that at a fairly organic way. I don't know if I want to use that word, organic, but you don't have to be super concerned with the rhetorical pattern when you're brainstorming and you're just beginning to fire off sections. But as soon as you've got some material to work with, then you're really going to want to look and see, well, what sort of rhetorical pattern seems to be apparent here, and should I move my definitions early in the paper? Should I move them late? What sort of classification and division type patterns am I going to include? Do I include those maybe within my option statements? And just really start to mess around and iron out a flow. So you are at the drafting stage, right? You've moved to that mode of presentation. You are really trying to think hard about your audience and then about the patterns that you have identified. So they're expecting something. And when you're done your writing and you're at the revision stage, you want to look. Have you sort of is there a clear rhetorical pattern that dominates your work? And I ask that more for your professional lives, because we have given you a pretty clear rhetorical pattern for this project, for the formal analytical report. You don't have many ways you can go, but you do have choices to make about the flow within that structure. I just want to show you a couple of quick examples in terms of outlining. You've got an inventory of low carbon energy for Canada, and nice title page. An outline can start like this. It can look like this, and they've got the executive summary, introduction and scope. They've got some descriptive material here, some definitional stuff. They've got some historical context. And then they begin a comparison, a contrast of these various sources, and then come back to their conclusion, to some recommendations. Not bad. When I look at this, it's not bad. Here's a different study, engineering microorganisms for energy production. Big US government report. As you create an outline, you should be thinking not just of content, that's what you want to start with first, but also design. Design should also always be in your head. Clarity of uptake for your audience. And look at their organization here. Look at all of these things they got under low carbon energy sources. That's a lot of information, and remembering levels and seeing those levels it's a little bit visually chaotic. I know we're not talking about design right now, but bear with me. You've got a much more clear structure here, and but there's nothing very complex going on. Right? Big documents. What I'll say, I think I've said it once before, I'll say it again this semester, is that the more complex your project, the more simple your structure should be. And this also goes for ideas, expressing ideas at the sentence level and the paragraph level. The more complex your idea that you're trying to convey, the more simple your sentence structure should be. So there's sort of an inverse relationship there, and they've kept it very simple, right? They've laid out a bunch of competing solar technologies. how they've got some explanation here and some definitional stuff. Looking at problems, constraints, right? What could be, what are the barriers, and then they list each one with subpoints, and it's great, right? It's easy to follow. They've got a section on the sort of cutting edge hydrogen production, and then some recommendations, some strategies. Sorry, no. So this is additional analysis, and then their recommendations come out here. And so your outline, when you think about flow, you can see that this person's moved from comparison to analysis to some, looking at the state of the art and identifying some further problems, right? They've really taken the time to educate the audience before they introduced their analysis, and then the recommendations come at the end, and they're quite brief. I'll come back to this report again.